what's happening is people realize they can't trust their local currency. They can't trust their local bank. If you don't trust the bank, why don't you trust the bank? In Canada, right, the bank might seize my assets if they disagree with me. In Afghanistan, the banks all failed, when the US pulled out. In Lebanon, the banks basically closed, froze everybody's assets, seized and converted all their foreign currency assets into local Lebanese money, devalued the money, and they locked it up for 10 years. When you have hundreds of millions, if not billions of people losing faith in the currency, losing faith in the banks, what do?
You may not be much of a spiritual person, but, as some may argue, it seems as though we are in the end days with risk of a sharp economic collapse and Bitcoin showing no signs of recovering. The worst fears of every investor have become a reality because of this. People have all started to lose hope in the traditional financial sector. So, what happens when there is a mass loss of confidence in the financial system? In fact, this is what a bank governor had to say. The ability to convince others to believe in something they can't see but wish to be true is a trick that has been effective in all sorts of ways throughout history. Take the case of paper money. Someone in China centuries ago printed a value on a piece of paper and asked everyone else to agree with them that the paper was actually worth what it said it was. The whole modern banking system of paper and credit is built on this one simple act of faith. As Saylor argues today, the days of putting your faith in traditional banks is over. It's time to take up digital assets instead. If you find the video helpful, then don't forget to subscribe. Let's get right into it.
So your diversification strategy with any given currency, whether it's the peso, the dollar, the euro, the ruble, the lira, the whatever, they're all correlated. So then you're like, okay, well, this is great. I'm just going to buy the dollar. All the currencies are correlated to the dollar, and the dollar's collapsing. How fast is the dollar collapsing? Well, you can watch it against real estate in Miami Beach, right? You can watch. All you got to do is look at the dollar versus any scarce desirable piece of property. So, what's the dollar valued in versus a Picasso, a Leonardo da Vinci, a city block in New York City, a desirable piece of beachfront property, and how about Palm Beach, right? What's happened to Palm Beach property in the past 10 years? I think that the problem ultimately is if you're on a sinking ship, you have to get off the ship. And the problem with diversification, like when you're in the retail industry and when it's completely getting obliterated by Amazon, you have to get off. You have to get out. There's no winning strategy, no matter how you diversify in. And so most of the time, these models, inflation is 2% or CPI, and we should stay diversified. They're based upon this very conventional wisdom that I live in this safe world and nothing has changed. When Godzilla shows up to the playground, the rules of the game change. This trend is going to continue. Crypto falls into this trend because what's happening is people realize they can't trust their local currency. They can't trust their local bank. If you don't trust the bank, why don't you trust the bank? In Canada, right, the bank might seize my assets if they disagree with me. In Afghanistan, the banks all failed, when the US pulled out. In Lebanon, the banks basically closed, froze everybody's assets, seized and converted all their foreign currency assets into local Lebanese money, devalued the money, and they locked it up for 10 years. Okay, so when you have hundreds of millions, if not billions of people losing faith in the currency, losing faith in the banks, what do? You look for the digital solution. And the digital solution is I download a mobile app to my phone, and then I convert whatever asset or work or property I have into a cryptocurrency. So that's one dynamic. You got 130 currencies floating in the world. There's probably only 2 or 3 that'll be left when the dust settles. You got the euro, the CNY, the USD. Everything else either gets pegged to those or it collapses into those. And then the second thing the world wants is it wants crypto property. It wants money to give to your grandchildren. I want to hold my money for 100 years, if not 1,000 years. The dollar won't work. The dollar is losing 2% of its value a month. Horrific over 36 months. It's catastrophic over 10 years. And people are getting smart enough to realize that that won't work. So the issue is, where do I put my long-term money? I need a savings account. So hence, this is where Bitcoin comes in. Bitcoin is the dominant crypto property network in the world. It's pretty much the only perfected digital property network the human race has created. It's a proven digital property. Everything else is a speculation that it may become property over time. Bitcoin is the success, and every like-kind competitor Bitcoin has collapsed against it, such that Bitcoin is the 95% dominant network in this space. The dollar is clearly the dominant currency, and it wants to be the dominant digital currency. It is really the dominant digital currency as well, despite the fact that the US government doesn't have, US banks issuing them yet. We've been slow on the uptake. You can see where this is headed, and the driver is the stampede of everybody else in the world. Right? You're a rich American and you feel comfortable with your banking structure. Okay, maybe you can ignore this, but name somebody in Africa, Asia, or South America that can ignore this issue right now.
A currency collapse can happen when people lose faith in the currency's stability or usefulness. This has happened to many countries throughout history, and it could happen to the United States. A currency collapse can be caused by things like improper valuations, chronic low growth, or inflation. Do you think that the dollar is bound to collapse, as Michael Saylor argues? And is Bitcoin the only solution for this? Let us know in the comments below.